Margaret Thompson had worked 30 years in Silicon Valley, watching the tech world transform from garage startups to glass towers that scraped the California sky. At 67, she possessed the kind of quiet brilliance that had helped build America's digital backbone, a computer science degree earned when women in STEM were rare as hen's teeth, decades of coding experience that predated the internet itself, and the wisdom that comes from surviving every boom and bust cycle since the personal computer revolution. But when she walked into StormTech Corporation's gleaming conference room on the 40th floor, wearing a simple gray dress from J.C. Penney and carrying a manila folder instead of a leather briefcase, the 5-person interview panel saw only what they expected to see: an elderly woman who didn't belong in their world of venture capital and algorithmic trading. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. What they didn't know, what their millennial arrogance and Silicon Valley smugness blinded them to, was that Margaret Thompson was married to Robert Storm, the 60-year-old CEO who had built StormTech from a 2-person operation in a Palo Alto garage into a $50 billion empire that employed 40,000 people across 3 continents. She had applied under her maiden name, seeking to prove herself on merit alone, just as she had done throughout a career that began when Fortran was cutting edge and ended with her pioneering artificial intelligence ethics protocols that now governed half the industry. The interview panel, led by 48-year-old HR Director Diana Brooks, a woman young enough to be Margaret's daughter, took one look at her sensible flats and thrift store cardigan and decided the interview was over before it began. The cruelty that followed would have broken a lesser person. They mocked her resume without reading it, poured ice water over her silver hair, destroyed her perfectly solved coding test, and had security guards drag her through the marble lobby like a common trespasser. 28-year-old Tyler Henderson, whose trust fund had bought him his MBA, laughed as coffee stained her blouse. 55-year-old Gregory Palmer, old enough to know better, dumped a wastebasket over her head while his colleagues filmed it on their phones. They saw a grandmother in discount clothing and assumed she was powerless, forgettable, disposable, just another relic from an analog age trying to survive in their digital kingdom. But Margaret Thompson had survived the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial meltdown, and 40 years of being underestimated in boardrooms full of men who thought coding was too complex for the female mind. She had co-founded 3 successful startups, held 7 patents in machine learning, and written the algorithms that powered StormTech's most profitable divisions. As she stood in that conference room, water dripping from her gray hair and coffee soaking through her sensible dress, she wasn't just enduring another humiliation. She was witnessing the kind of workplace discrimination that had plagued American businesses for generations, the same prejudice that had kept brilliant minds sidelined simply because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of success. The 5 executives who tormented her that day thought they were punishing a nobody. They had no idea they were about to face the wrath of the most powerful man in Silicon Valley and learn that true power often wears the most humble disguise. The characters in Margaret Thompson's story represent a cross-section of American corporate culture that reveals disturbing truths about how age, appearance, and class prejudice have infected our nation's most prestigious workplaces. Each individual embodies specific generational attitudes and moral failings that speak to broader societal issues that readers who have lived through decades of American social change will recognize with painful clarity. At 67, Margaret Thompson represents the best of what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation and their immediate successors, individuals who built America's technological infrastructure through sheer determination and intellectual rigor. Her computer science degree, earned in an era when women comprised less than 15% of STEM graduates, speaks to a pioneering spirit that modern corporate America has forgotten to value. Her 3 decades in Silicon Valley span the entire digital revolution, from the days when programming required punch cards and mainframe computers filled entire rooms to today's artificial intelligence systems that she helped design. Margaret's calm demeanor throughout her humiliation reflects the stoic resilience of Americans who survived the Great Depression, World War II, and the Cold War. Generations that understood dignity came from within, not from designer labels or corner offices. Her choice to apply under her maiden name reveals a profound understanding of meritocracy that younger generations seem to have abandoned. Margaret wanted to prove herself on ability alone, just as she had done throughout a career that began when Fortran was cutting-edge technology, and women were often relegated to computer operator roles while men received credit for their innovations. Her thrift store clothing and sensible flats weren't signs of poverty. They were conscious choices made by someone who understood that true worth isn't measured in thread count or brand names. This philosophy, deeply rooted in Depression-era values of frugality and substance over style, stands in stark contrast to the materialistic culture that has consumed corporate America. The cruelty Margaret endures, ice water poured over her silver hair, coffee stains on her modest blouse, trash dumped over her head, represents every indignity that older Americans have faced in workplaces that worship youth and dismiss experience. Her steady hands gathering the torn pieces of her resume mirror the patience of countless seniors who have watched their contributions minimized by colleagues young enough to be their grandchildren. Margaret's silence throughout the ordeal isn't weakness. It's the quiet strength of someone who has weathered far worse storms and emerged intact. Diana Brooks, The Corruption of Professional Authority. Diana Brooks, the 48-year-old HR director, embodies the worst aspects of middle management power corrupted by generational prejudice and class consciousness. Her red blazer and perfectly styled blonde bob represent the armor of corporate conformity, a uniform designed to project authority while masking fundamental insecurity. Diana's immediate dismissal of Margaret, based on appearance alone, reveals how human resources departments, originally created to protect workers, have evolved into gatekeeping mechanisms that perpetuate discrimination rather than prevent it. Her decision to write "loser" across Margaret's resume with a black marker represents a level of professional cruelty that would have been unthinkable in earlier eras of American business culture. This act of vandalism, for that's what it truly was, demonstrates how power without wisdom inevitably leads to abuse. Diana's generation, raised during the economic boom of the 1980s and 1990s, often confused material success with moral superiority, believing that expensive clothing and corporate titles granted them the right to judge others' worth. The filming of Margaret's humiliation on smartphones adds a particularly modern dimension to Diana's cruelty. This behavior reflects a social media culture where public shaming has become entertainment, where viral videos matter more than human dignity. Diana's assumption that her mockery would be consequence-free reveals the dangerous insularity of corporate culture, where executives believe their glass towers protect them from accountability. Gregory Palmer, at 55, represents the tragedy of middle management mediocrity elevated beyond its competence. His Rolex watch and pen-twirling gestures are the props of a man desperately trying to project authority he hasn't earned through merit. Palmer's generation came of age during the Reagan era, when corporate culture began prioritizing style over substance, when MBA programs taught students to manage spreadsheets rather than understand the human cost of their decisions. His destruction of Margaret's perfectly solved coding test, ripping it in half with deliberate cruelty, represents the fear that incompetent managers feel when confronted with genuine expertise. Palmer's inability to recognize the brilliance of Margaret's work reveals his own intellectual limitations, while his decision to destroy evidence of her competence exposes the moral bankruptcy that often accompanies professional insecurity. The fact that he later ends up homeless, reduced to begging on street corners, serves as a stark reminder that borrowed authority is temporary, but character deficits are permanent. Palmer's fall from corporate executive to street beggar represents more than personal failure. It's a metaphor for how American capitalism can elevate the wrong people to positions of power, only to watch them destroy themselves when their fundamental inadequacies are exposed. His trembling hands holding a cardboard sign, the same hands that once destroyed Margaret's test papers, illustrate the poetic justice that sometimes emerges when moral reckoning finally arrives. 28-year-old Tyler Henderson embodies the worst characteristics of inherited privilege meeting generational entitlement. His trust fund background and expensive suit represent the dynasty brat mentality that has infected American corporate culture. Young people who mistake family wealth for personal achievement, who confuse inherited opportunity with earned authority. Tyler's casual cruelty toward Margaret, including pouring ice water over her head and mocking her age, reflects a disturbing erosion of the respect for elders that once defined American social values. Tyler's generation, raised in an era of participation trophies and social media validation, often lacks the emotional intelligence to recognize genuine accomplishment when it doesn't conform to their narrow expectations. His assumption that Margaret's modest appearance disqualified her from consideration reveals how superficial criteria have replaced substantive evaluation in modern hiring practices. The water he poured over her gray hair wasn't just an act of workplace bullying. It was a symbolic assault on the wisdom and experience that built the very company where he sought employment. His ultimate downfall, watching his family's dynasty doors slam shut as his behavior is broadcast to millions of viewers, represents the consequences that await those who mistake privilege for permanence. Tyler's viral humiliation serves as a cautionary tale about how quickly social media can transform perpetrators into victims of their own cruelty. These characters collectively represent a fundamental shift in American corporate culture that readers over 65 will recognize with dismay. The story illustrates how meritocracy, once the cornerstone of American opportunity, has been corrupted by appearance-based prejudice, age discrimination, and class consciousness. Margaret's treatment reflects the systematic devaluation of experience and wisdom that has characterized American business culture since the dot-com boom, when youth became synonymous with innovation and age with obsolescence. The panel's behavior also highlights how workplace discrimination has evolved in the digital age. While overt racism and sexism have become legally risky, age discrimination and class-based prejudice continue to thrive under the guise of cultural fit and energy level assessments. Margaret's experience represents thousands of older Americans who have been pushed out of careers not because they lack competence, but because they don't conform to youth-obsessed corporate aesthetics. The story's resolution, with Margaret's tormentors facing complete professional destruction while she continues to thrive, offers hope that justice, though delayed, can still prevail. However, it also serves as a warning about the moral decay that occurs when corporate power becomes divorced from ethical responsibility, when authority is granted based on appearance rather than achievement, and when respect for human dignity becomes secondary to maintaining social hierarchies based on superficial criteria. The story of Margaret Thompson's humiliation and ultimate vindication serves as a powerful allegory for the deeper moral struggles that have defined American corporate culture for generations. Her experience in that gleaming conference room 40 floors above Silicon Valley represents more than individual cruelty. It exposes the fundamental corruption of systems that were supposed to embody our nation's highest ideals of fairness and opportunity. For readers who witnessed the post-World War II economic boom, when hard work and talent could genuinely lift families from poverty to prosperity, Margaret's treatment represents a betrayal of everything that made America exceptional. The interview panel's immediate dismissal of her qualifications based solely on her thrift store clothing reveals how our supposed meritocracy has devolved into a sophisticated caste system. When Diana Brooks scrawled "loser" across Margaret's resume without reading a single line, she wasn't just vandalizing paper. She was defacing the American dream itself. The irony cuts deeper when we consider that Margaret's modest appearance reflected the same values that built this nation: frugality, substance over style, and the belief that character matters more than costume. Her sensible flats and simple cardigan represented the Depression-era wisdom that guided the greatest generation through economic hardship and World War. Yet, in the glass towers of modern corporate America, these virtues have become markers of failure rather than strength. The panel's mockery of her flea market appearance demonstrated how far we've drifted from the foundational principle that worth should be measured by contribution, not by the price tag on one's clothing. Margaret's perfectly solved coding test, torn in half by Gregory Palmer's manicured hands, symbolizes the systematic destruction of merit-based evaluation in favor of superficial judgments. Her algorithms, which had powered StormTech's most profitable systems for years, were literally shredded because they came from someone who didn't look the part. This act of intellectual vandalism represents a broader cultural shift where appearance has become more important than ability, where the packaging matters more than the product. The five-person panel believed they were gatekeepers of excellence, protecting their company from unworthy candidates. In reality, they had become the very corruption they claimed to guard against. Their behavior reflects a disturbing trend in American business culture where discrimination has been repackaged as cultural fit, and prejudice masquerades as professional judgment. Diana Brooks, with her red blazer and perfectly styled hair, represented the new face of workplace discrimination. Polished, educated, and utterly convinced of her own righteousness. This moral blindness extends beyond individual prejudice to institutional failure. The panel's confidence in filming Margaret's humiliation reveals how normalized workplace cruelty has become in the social media age. They assumed their mockery would be consequence-free entertainment, shared among colleagues who would applaud their cleverness rather than condemn their cruelty. This assumption speaks to a corporate culture where empathy has been replaced by cynicism, where viral moments matter more than human dignity. The water Tyler Henderson poured over Margaret's silver hair wasn't just an act of physical assault. It was a baptism of humiliation designed to wash away her dignity and mark her as unworthy. The coffee Gregory Palmer splashed across her blouse created stains that were meant to be permanent reminders of her supposed inadequacy. These acts of deliberate degradation reveal how workplace discrimination has evolved from subtle exclusion to overt cruelty, emboldened by the belief that certain people deserve whatever treatment they receive. The dramatic irony of Margaret's concealed identity serves as a metaphor for how often we fail to recognize true worth when it doesn't conform to our expectations. Her quiet presence in that boardroom represented every undervalued worker whose contributions go unrecognized, every experienced professional dismissed because they don't fit someone's narrow definition of success. The panel's complete ignorance of her true identity reflects a broader cultural blindness that judges books by their covers and people by their appearances. Robert Storm's methodical revelation of his wife's identity transforms the story from personal humiliation to corporate reckoning. His calm recitation of the panel's cruelty, forcing them to repeat their words before the board and shareholders, represents the kind of accountability that has been missing from American business culture for too long. The security footage replay serves as an electronic mirror, forcing the perpetrators to confront their actions and witness their own moral bankruptcy in high definition. The boardroom's stunned silence when Margaret's true identity was revealed speaks to the power of hidden truth. For 40 minutes, these executives had tormented the woman whose brilliance had built their empire, whose code ran their systems, whose innovations generated their profits. Their shock wasn't just surprise. It was the recognition that they had revealed their true characters to the very person who could destroy them. This moment of revelation serves as a reminder that in our interconnected world, cruelty rarely remains hidden forever. Robert Storm's intervention represents a kind of biblical justice that resonates deeply with readers who understand that actions have consequences, that moral debts eventually come due. His rise from a trailer park to Silicon Valley royalty embodies the American dream at its finest, the belief that talent and determination can overcome any obstacle. His defense of Margaret wasn't just personal vindication. It was a restoration of moral order in a system that had lost its way. The swift and complete destruction of the 5 panel members serves as a modern parable about the wages of sin. Diana Brooks's red blazer, once a symbol of authority, became a scarlet letter marking her professional death. Gregory Palmer's Rolex, which had flashed as he destroyed Margaret's test, became worthless when his reputation crumbled. Tyler Henderson's expensive suit, tailored to project success, couldn't protect him from the consequences of his cruelty. Their fall, from corporate grace to personal ruin, illustrates how character flaws eventually exact their price, regardless of position or privilege. The viral nature of their downfall adds a particularly modern dimension to their punishment. In an era where social media can amplify both cruelty and justice, their mockery of Margaret became their own public execution. The same technology they used to film her humiliation became the instrument of their destruction, broadcasting their shame to millions of viewers who would forever associate their names with workplace cruelty. Margaret's story serves as a cautionary tale about the moral decay that occurs when corporate power becomes divorced from ethical responsibility. The panel's behavior represents a broader cultural crisis, where respect for human dignity has become secondary to maintaining social hierarchies based on superficial criteria. Their assumption that Margaret was powerless and disposable reflects a dangerous mindset that views certain people as less worthy of basic respect. The epilogue's image of Gregory Palmer homeless, while Margaret thrives professionally, provides satisfying closure that resonates with readers who understand that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails. The quarter Margaret drops in his cup represents mercy without reconciliation, acknowledging his humanity while maintaining appropriate boundaries. This act of controlled compassion demonstrates the difference between justice and revenge, between accountability and cruelty. The story's resolution affirms that while injustice may prevail temporarily, truth and character endure. Margaret's journey from humiliation to vindication offers hope that merit and dignity will ultimately triumph over prejudice and cruelty. For readers who have witnessed similar transformations throughout their lives, from the civil rights movement to women's liberation, to the ongoing struggle for workplace equality, this narrative provides both validation and inspiration. The broader implications extend beyond individual justice to systemic change. The complete professional destruction of the 5 panel members sends a clear message to corporate America. Discrimination has consequences, cruelty will be punished, and human dignity must be respected regardless of appearance or perceived status. This story serves as both warning and promise, a reminder that in our interconnected world, moral choices matter more than ever, and that justice, though sometimes hidden, is always watching. The dramatic architecture of Margaret Thompson's story unfolds with the precision of a classical tragedy, where each act of cruelty builds inexorably toward a climactic revelation that transforms victims into victors and exposes the moral bankruptcy of those who mistake power for righteousness. For readers who have witnessed the evolution of American corporate culture over the past half-century, this narrative structure serves as both entertainment and education, demonstrating how workplace discrimination has evolved from subtle exclusion to overt cruelty, and how justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails through the very systems that initially enabled abuse. The story's dramatic tension begins with subtle dismissal and escalates through a carefully orchestrated sequence of increasingly vicious attacks that would have been unthinkable in the corporate America of previous generations. Diana Brooks's initial mockery of Margaret's thrift store appearance represents the opening movement of this cruel symphony, a verbal assault that establishes the panel's contempt while revealing their fundamental misunderstanding of true worth. Her decision to scrawl "loser" across Margaret's resume with a black marker serves as the first crescendo, transforming professional evaluation into personal vandalism that violates every principle of workplace dignity that the greatest generation fought to establish. The destruction of Margaret's perfectly solved coding test by Gregory Palmer represents the story's second movement, where intellectual vandalism replaces reasoned assessment. His deliberate tearing of her work, solutions that demonstrated mastery of systems he couldn't comprehend, symbolizes the broader assault on expertise that has characterized American business culture since the rise of style over substance. The torn papers fluttering to the conference room floor like confetti represent not just destroyed documentation, but the systematic devaluation of knowledge and experience that has plagued older workers for decades. Tyler Henderson's water assault marks the story's transition from psychological to physical cruelty, crossing a line that transforms workplace discrimination into outright assault. The ice water cascading over Margaret's silver hair represents a baptism of humiliation, designed to wash away her dignity and mark her as unworthy of basic human respect. This act of deliberate degradation reveals how workplace bullying has evolved in the social media age, where viral moments matter more than human dignity, where cruelty becomes performance art for an audience of enablers. The coffee staining and trash dumping that follow represent the story's climactic crescendo of cruelty, where the panel's behavior descends into mob mentality that would have shocked corporate leaders of earlier eras. The brown stains blooming across Margaret's modest blouse serve as visible markers of their contempt, while the coffee grounds clinging to her gray hair transform a distinguished professional into what they perceive as human refuse. These final acts of degradation reveal the complete moral collapse of individuals who have confused authority with license, who believe their positions grant them the right to dehumanize those they deem inferior. The boardroom confrontation serves as the story's dramatic fulcrum, where hidden truth explodes into devastating revelation with the force of a corporate earthquake. Robert Storm's methodical exposure of his wife's identity transforms the narrative from personal humiliation to institutional reckoning, demonstrating how power, when wielded by those with genuine moral authority, can serve justice rather than perpetuate oppression. His calm recitation of the panel's cruelty, forcing them to repeat their words before the board and shareholders, represents the kind of accountability that has been missing from American business culture for too long. The security footage replay serves as an electronic mirror that forces the perpetrators to confront their actions in high definition, creating a moment of moral reckoning that resonates with readers who understand that actions have consequences. That character eventually reveals itself under pressure. The stunned silence that greets Margaret's true identity speaks to the power of hidden truth and the danger of judging others by superficial criteria. For 40 minutes, these executives had tormented the woman whose brilliance had built their empire, whose code ran their systems, whose innovations generated their profits. The viral nature of their downfall adds a particularly modern dimension to their punishment, demonstrating how social media can amplify both cruelty and justice with equal force. The same technology they used to film Margaret's humiliation becomes the instrument of their destruction, broadcasting their shame to millions of viewers who witness the complete reversal of power dynamics. This digital amplification serves as a cautionary tale about how quickly our worst moments can define our legacy in an interconnected world where privacy has become an illusion, and accountability is often just one viral video away. The story's resolution follows a classical pattern of poetic justice that satisfies readers' sense of moral order while demonstrating the long-term consequences of ethical choices. Diana Brooks's red blazer, once a symbol of authority, becomes a scarlet letter marking her professional death as she's escorted from the building by the same security guards who had dragged Margaret through the lobby. Her marker, which had defaced Margaret's resume, becomes a metaphorical noose that strangles her career as the business world witnesses her cruelty broadcast to millions. Gregory Palmer's fall from corporate executive to homeless beggar represents the most dramatic reversal in the story's moral universe, demonstrating how character flaws eventually exact their price regardless of position or privilege. His Rolex, which had flashed as he destroyed Margaret's test, becomes worthless when his reputation crumbles, and his name becomes synonymous with workplace cruelty. The image of his trembling hands holding a cardboard sign, the same hands that once ripped apart Margaret's work, serves as a powerful reminder that borrowed authority is temporary, but character deficits are permanent. Tyler Henderson's transformation from dynasty heir to industry pariah illustrates how quickly inherited privilege can evaporate when moral bankruptcy is exposed. His expensive suit, tailored to project success, cannot protect him from the consequences of his cruelty as family doors slam shut, and his trust fund becomes worthless in the face of universal condemnation. His water assault on Margaret becomes a drowning of his own prospects, demonstrating how acts of cruelty often destroy the perpetrator more than the victim. Margaret's behavior throughout her ordeal serves as a master class in dignity under fire, demonstrating the kind of moral resilience that comes from knowing one's worth regardless of others' opinions. Her calm gathering of torn resume pieces, her steady hands despite the ice-water shock, her composed walk through the marble lobby while coffee dripped from her hair. These actions reveal character forged through decades of facing adversity with grace. Her silence throughout the abuse wasn't weakness, but strength. The quiet power of someone who understands that responding to cruelty with cruelty only multiplies the darkness. The epilogue's image of Margaret dropping a quarter into Gregory Palmer's cup represents the story's final moral lesson about the difference between justice and revenge, between accountability and cruelty. Her act of controlled compassion, acknowledging his humanity while maintaining appropriate boundaries, demonstrates the kind of moral sophistication that separates truly strong people from those who merely wield power. The coin, glinting in his palm, serves as a reminder that mercy can coexist with justice, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, and that true strength lies in choosing dignity even when dealing with those who showed none. The story's dramatic structure ultimately affirms that while injustice may prevail temporarily, truth and character endure beyond the reach of those who would corrupt them. Margaret's journey from humiliation to vindication offers hope that merit and dignity will ultimately triumph over prejudice and cruelty, a message that resonates deeply with readers who have witnessed similar transformations throughout their lives. The complete professional destruction of the 5 panel members serves as both warning and promise, a reminder that in our interconnected world, moral choices matter more than ever, and that justice, though sometimes hidden, is always watching. For readers who have lived through decades of social change, this narrative provides both validation and inspiration, demonstrating that the values they fought to establish, respect for human dignity, evaluation based on merit rather than appearance, accountability for those in positions of power, remain relevant and powerful in an age that often seems to have forgotten them. The story serves as a bridge between generations, showing how timeless moral principles can triumph over contemporary corruption, how individual character can overcome institutional failure, and how justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails when truth finally comes to light. Margaret Thompson's story serves as a powerful reminder that in America, character ultimately triumphs over cruelty, and dignity endures longer than designer suits or corporate titles. Her journey from humiliation to vindication demonstrates that true strength isn't measured by how loudly we fight back, but by how gracefully we maintain our composure when others reveal their worst selves. The quarter she dropped into Gregory Palmer's trembling palm 6 months later wasn't charity. It was the final punctuation mark on a lesson about consequences that resonates deeply with anyone who has lived long enough to witness how moral debts eventually come due. For readers who have weathered decades of American social change, Margaret's quiet triumph validates every experience of being underestimated, dismissed, or judged by superficial criteria. Her story affirms that while workplace discrimination may evolve with each generation, from overt prejudice to subtle bias to the cruel performance art of social media humiliation, the fundamental truth remains unchanged. Treating others with dignity reveals our character more than our achievements ever could. The complete professional destruction of the 5 panel members serves as both warning and promise to corporate America. In our interconnected world where viral videos can transform perpetrators into pariahs overnight, cruelty is no longer consequence-free entertainment. Margaret's code still runs StormTech's most profitable systems, while her tormentors' names have become synonymous with workplace toxicity. Her legacy builds bridges, theirs burned them. This story reminds us that in the end, we are remembered not for our titles or bank accounts, but for how we treated others when we thought no one was watching, because someone always is. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the sting of judgment before you even spoke a word? Have you witnessed workplace cruelty disguised as professional standards, or experienced the quiet strength that comes from maintaining dignity when others show their worst? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone facing their own Margaret Thompson moment. Like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the power of character over circumstance.